For some, it took clinical death. For others, it took an inexplicable, spontaneous, out-of-body experience. Something Super Spiritual presents the limited series Forever Changed. Join me as we explore the phenomena known as the near-death experience and the spiritually transformative experience. Both tend to spiritually activate and heal those who have traveled to the other side and back again. Many of these people are spiritually awakened and in some cases, miraculously physically healed from such diseases as cancer. All are left forever changed. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Something Super Spiritual. We have really special guest today. I'm so excited to introduce you to Karen Thomas. And Karen Thomas was recommended by our new friend, Jen. She was on the show just a couple weeks ago, and she had such an incredible story with her own near-death experience. And she told me, you've got to talk to my friend Karen. So here's Karen, everybody. I was going to introduce her in the way that we do, but I want you to hear it from her because her story is really incredible and really worth hearing. And we need to hear more about this, more and more and more. It's happening all the time, isn't it, Karen?
It is. And it's much more known now than it was back when this all happened to me.
Yeah.
And so
with regard to your near-death experience, what was life like before that? Like, were you in a religion and spiritual? What was that like?
Yeah, before that, yes, I was. And you almost have to go way back before that to understand why I was. When I was a little child, I was with my dad and out in a fishing boat when he had a heart attack and died. And I was only 7. And that had a very big impact on my life. And particularly because I prayed for him not to die, for him to live. And my prayer to me seemed that it wasn't answered.
Sure.
And so I went into a whole long lifetime period of feeling like I wasn't worthy to have my prayers answered. And how can I find out how to be worthy and how to be able to go to heaven someday, and all of that. So that all kind of was built into my growing up time period. And by the time of my near-death experience, I had gotten to the point where I was very involved with born-again Christianity, and particularly with a very charismatic church, and had begun to be watching things on TV and hearing things about this thing called being baptized in the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues and all this, Pentecostal sort of thing. And so my husband and I had moved to Alaska, to Anchorage, and we had 2 small children, 9 and 6, and I was working as a physical therapist. My husband was working as a machinist, and we had moved there specifically for the machinist work and brought our 2 small children with us. And anyway, I hurt my back. I had also had back surgery like 5 years before that. And so it looked like I might need to have a spinal fusion instead of a laminectomy. So I was very much into praying about this whole situation because it had brought me out of work. I wasn't able to do my profession. And so I was praying about that a lot, asking people back in upstate New York where we came from to pray also, and the church that we were attending then. And so that was what was going on. And I literally wasn't sure whether my surgery was going to be laminectomy or spinal fusion as I went into it. And my husband and two kids had gone to the hospital with me that day, and I was brought to a big operating room suite. This was the same hospital that I worked at, by the way. And I remember going on the stretcher, them being directed to a waiting room, and me being taken into the whole OR suite and moved into an OR and moved onto a table, turned onto my stomach so they could reopen the incision on my back. And then I was put under anesthesia. And it was as the surgery was progressing that the surgeon accidentally cut the major artery feeding my leg. And I bled out on the operating room table. And when that took place, my consciousness left my body. And I was literally up in the corner of this operating room. And I'm seeing these ceiling tiles just inches away from me. And I'm hearing all this yelling and swearing by the doctor. And so my consciousness turned in that direction just in time to see them flipping my body from being face down to being face up, and realizing that that was my body that I was looking at.
Whoa.
But I was filled with this sense of peace and calm and detachment, real detachment from, yeah, that's my body, but hey, I'm alive. What's going on? And my immediate thought was about my husband and my kids, because I thought, somehow I've got to get to them. I have to let them know I'm okay. I'm me. And as soon as I started thinking that, my consciousness literally moved through the wall of this operating room and out into a hallway, and past all these other operating rooms and out into the hallway outside. And I'm trying to think where this waiting room might be, and I'm just moving along like this, when all of a sudden a telepathic voice spoke that I could hear in my mind and said, pay attention to this man. And so my attention was drawn to my left as a man was rushing back the way I had just come from. And I'm very nearsighted. So, you can see I wear glasses. And obviously they'd been taken off when I was being operated on. But I could zoom in on this guy and see his hair color, his eye color, what he was wearing. And, just like I was zooming in. And I began to hear his thoughts. And his thoughts were, I've got to get in there, got to get in that operating area fast. And I heard him thinking this. I saw him rushing up to where I had just come through. And then I heard the thoughts of a man who was just in that hallway and looking at this guy and saying, what does this guy think he's doing? He can't go in there where they're operating on people. And so I'm hearing this byplay of their thoughts. And then the guy I was supposed to pay attention to slowed down and then stopped just very briefly. And then these double doors opened up and he rushed on inside the operating suite. And then I turned my attention back to trying to find my husband and kids. And before I could continue going, suddenly I was being drawn. I wasn't controlling my own movement anymore. And I felt as though I was being lifted up, literally drawn up through the ceiling of this floor I was on, up into the next floor, up till I was out of the hospital completely, and up toward, there's mountains behind this hospital in Anchorage, high up over the mountains, and then was pulled really rapidly in a horizontal direction out over the city. And as I reached the edge of the water, suddenly this big, dark, tunnel-looking, cave-looking thing opened up that I was pulled into also. And once I was inside it, it was as though I went into this amazingly fast speed. It was so dark, completely dark, and yet way, way off in the distance, just a tiny prick of light. But at the speed I felt like I was moving, it was like no time at all. And this light got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until I burst into it.
Was it scary
And
dark?
it wasn't scary dark. It was just very enveloping darkness, except for that bright, bright light in the distance.
Okay, okay.
But so it got so big, I burst into this light. And when I did, the feelings that I was having of calm and sort of detachment, they just magnified into tremendous bliss and peace and enormous love and just all these emotions you can't even begin to put into words.
Sure.
And it just filled me. And I turned my attention down because I thought, where am I? And as I turned my attention down, I saw I had no feet. But I saw ground underneath where I was that was kind of brown and rocky looking. And my initial thought was, ooh, this is like a desert. This is really dry. And I thought, I must be dead, but this doesn't look like heaven. And so that was the first thought. And then I heard another telepathic voice, and it was off to my left. And this voice said, follow me. And as I heard those words and turned in that direction, I saw there was a man who was climbing up a slope out of this area that I had come out into. And I was right behind him, like only a few feet behind him. And then, so I was looking at, who is this guy? And again, I thought, well, I'm dead. I expected to be with Jesus. And as I looked at him, I thought, well, he's got his almost black hair and it's pulled back and tied, and he has this off-white garment on thing, but it was only down to about the middle of his thigh, and with another tie around his waist, and then sandals on his feet, but ties that crisscrossed up his calves and tied under his knee.
Interesting.
And I thought, that isn't what Jesus would be wearing. Who is this guy? And yet I felt as though he cared deeply about me and that I should know who it is, although all I was seeing at this point was the back of him. And we came up over this slope, and the whole landscape changed completely. And it was lush and green and dotted everywhere with flowers of colors you can't even begin to describe, and trees in the distance, and the light that filled everything was filling everything I was looking at. So the grass felt like it was emanating light, and the flowers did, and the trees, and it was not just in them, it was glowing out of them, and everything around was also all full of this light that was love and everything else, peace. And it was just amazing. And the man that I was told to follow had gone on ahead, and he spoke again and said, follow me. And so I was immediately up behind him again. And at this point, he was on the bank of a river. And the river was, again, the water was crystal and diamond-like and glowing and giving off light and so alive. And across the water, on the opposite bank, was my father, who had died, and my brother, who'd been killed in a car accident, and a whole huge group of family members that had passed away, that I began to identify which one was which, and including two couples, 4 people that were my 4 grandparents that had died before I was born too. And everyone was just, oh, she's here. Isn't this amazing? It's wonderful. Oh, it's great. Oh, this is so good. And I'm feeling their love flowing to me, and I'm loving them and thinking, oh, I want to be with them. And the man that I had been following, he said, no, right now we have to go somewhere else first. And I thought of him as like a guide. And actually, since I wasn't able to move my consciousness, well, myself on my own, and I was still being drawn, I had to leave, and was drawn behind him as he went down and around this curve in the river. And it opened up into a huge open area. And in the center of it was this enormous building that was pearlescent white, and it was glowing like everything else, and it looked like a Roman or a Greek temple.
Mm-hmm.
Enormous columns, white columns all along the front, and enormous stairs going up to this big opening doorway area. And the man that I was beginning to call my guide had gone up to those doors. And I was just seeing that there were other spiritual beings that were here. And some were at the foot of these stairs, and, a couple were coming down. And when my guide said, follow me again, I was immediately behind him. And the doors, we went through these huge opening doors and into what appeared to be, once you were inside, appeared to be an enormous library. And on either side, there was story upon story upon story of books and old scrolls and things going. And I would look up, and it didn't even seem like there was any ceiling to this place. It was so huge. And down through the center area of it were tables upon tables upon tables, and spiritual beings that were at the tables or standing up or bringing, looking at books. And my guide said to me, this is where the books of life are stored, but we're not staying here now. We have somewhere else. Follow me. So we went down this big, long, enormous, entryway with the big shelves on the sides, until we got to a small doorway that went into a hallway. And then just a short distance into that, there was another doorway, and we went in. And when we went in, there was a big oval area that was surrounded by spiritual beings. And my guide said, this is where we're going to review your life. And I'm looking around at these spiritual beings and thinking, gosh, I should know them. They also seemed like they loved and cared about me, and they were there for this. And as he said that about reviewing my life, the oval area, the center portion of it, had appeared to be just like it was clear or open. But all of a sudden, my life from the time I was born right up until this time began appearing almost like a hologram. And I was able to be myself in all of the different interactions of my life that had taken place. And the other important part was that I was able to be the other person or persons that I was interacting with too.
Yep.
I could feel everything that they were feeling, whether it was happy or hurt or angry, and feeling myself at the same time. And then the big thing was that I was able to see what actions rippled out from the interaction that had taken place.
Oh my gosh.
So, to see that person I was interacting with then go forth, and how they interacted with the next person that they came in contact with, and then the next person from them, and this huge, unending rippling out of the feelings and the emotions of it all. So things that I felt badly, that I had behaved badly or hurt or something, I felt, sad. And I thought, oh, I could have done better than that. Why did I react like that. And each of the people who were spiritual beings who were there and my guide were all, no, no, no. You need to understand how important it is, your feelings, your words, your actions, and how it's not just you and how it goes out to everyone else. And that's all, that it's for you to understand this better and really learn from it. And, don't feel bad. You can stay here if you want to, or if you want, you can return to your life. But before you decide, we want to show you some things that definitely will happen in your life if you decide to go back, or might possibly happen. There's a strong possibility, but aren't definite, because every person has free will. And the people that you will be interacting with have the free will to choose something possibly different than what we're going to show you. But we want to show you these things before you decide.
Wow.
So I watched all of that. And then I know something happened, but I've never been allowed to remember what the something was that happened. Because suddenly, in what I recall, I'm in a totally different room. It's a smaller room, and it's just my guide and me. And he says to me, I want to show you something. And he shows me off to the right. And he said, I want you to see the prayers of the people that are praying for you. And so when I look to the right, I see all of these musical notes like on a musical score. And each note, like a whole note or a quarter note or whatever, I see one note and then I see another note that sits on top of it, like not like horizontal across the score, but vertical, going up and coming closer and closer to where we are. And my guide said, each prayer has its own unique vibration. And I didn't hear anything, but I saw the prayers representing like notes on a score. And then my guide said, but I want you to see over here what's happening in the waiting room in the hospital. And then as I looked, it was as though I could see right through, as though there were no ceiling in this waiting room. And I saw my husband standing at the doorway with the doctor who had operated on me in his surgical garb. And behind them and over near like a small couch, I saw my daughter and my son. And I saw my daughter thinking that this doctor had come after all this long time, and that maybe I had died. Maybe that's what the doctor was saying. And so she prayed that I would live. And when she did, it was like the last note of the prayers. And it opened up all of my emotions of being myself. And so when I saw that and felt all of that, I knew my decision had to be to return to my life. That was the right thing to do. I had to be there for them, so that they weren't growing up without a parent. And for who knows what all else that lay ahead of me. So I remember making that decision, and my guide said, you'll be able to remember the majority of this, but you won't be able to remember anything we showed you about your future, because that would take away your free will. You'd be not truly deciding on your own. You'd be doing what you thought you were supposed to do.
Sure.
And so you won't remember those things, but you'll have proof that this all really happened. And with that, I don't remember a trip back. I don't remember anything except waking up in a recovery room and my husband and kids being there, and instantly being filled with all the love and enormous peace and bliss that I had experienced while I was on the other side, filling me and surrounding me like a bubble. And so I felt, oh my gosh, I've never felt anything like this before. I know it's true. It really happened. But at the same time, my consciousness that operates through my body, through my mind and my brain, that consciousness was befuddled coming out of anesthesia, trying to figure out what the heck had happened, thinking that because my abdomen had been all opened up and had this huge incision, did I have a baby? I had that part of my bodily functioning was totally befuddled. But
Yeah.
so I've come to believe that we have two consciousness, that one is our spiritual soul's consciousness, and the other operates solely through our brain and our body and our physical self. And but anyway, I was in the hospital 12 days, ICU, really touch and go. And at a point fairly early on, a doctor came in. There were doctors and nurses coming to check on me a lot, but a doctor came in, and as soon as he walked in, I realized that he was the man that I had been told to pay close attention to,
Sure.
that had been rushing into the operating suite. And he was dressed in street clothes and stuff. And when that had happened, but I recognized his face and I realized it was the same guy. So
Oh,
a couple of weeks after getting home and discharged, and having told my husband I had this experience you just would not believe, and he somewhat didn't believe. And so I said, I've got to go get all these staples taken out, and I'm going to ask this doctor who had checked on me and that I had been really kind to me. I'm going to ask him about what I saw when I was out of my body when I saw him. And so I did that at that follow-up appointment, and I described, what he was wearing and everything. And his response was, "How could you know that?" He said, "I had been in my office seeing patients, and I got paged to come to the hospital stat to try to save this person who had bled out on the operating room table." And so I knew that was my proof, that I had been told I would have proof. And another doctor I ended up meeting for another follow-up appointment for a different problem they had uncovered during the surgery. He wondered, what is this huge incision? What happened to you? And so I told him, what had happened, and, what about the artery being cut. And his response to me was, "Oh, that was you?" And I said, "What?"
oh,
And he said, "Oh, I was in an adjacent operating room." And he said, "Man, I can tell you the air was blue in that place when that happened. And everybody knew something awful had taken place, So a second doctor confirmed the fact about that I had heard the doctor swearing and, ordering nurses around and stuff.
yeah.
So I had kind of a double confirmation, and that's my story.
Wow. Excuse me. It makes me so emotional.
Yeah, me too.
so
All
beautiful.
these years later,
Yeah,
40 some.
it's amazing. So many of our loved ones on the other side come through in these sessions with mediums, and they talk about their experience in their life review, and they talk about how they felt the other person's feelings. And if you go through life just treating other people unkindly and and begrudgingly and putting people down and dismissive and abusive. However, we feel that tenfold, right? When we're in that
Yeah.
life review. And they say, if we go through life open-hearted and loving and kind and giving, and how we feel that tenfold.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just to hear you having experienced that firsthand after I've heard from so many on the other side, their experiences. It's just it's a miracle. It's just miraculous, to be able to witness this with you.
It is.
Thank you for sharing this as many times as you have, and I'm sure you've told this story how many times, and I just am sitting here with you, and it feels like I'm hearing you tell it for the first time. It's
Yeah,
just it's amazing.
that's what a near-death experience is like. It's not it's not like any other memory. It's not like a hallucination. It's not like a dream. It's like something that becomes totally a part of you, and that when you do share it with other people, the sharing of it is partially a reliving of it.
Yeah,
So that, you know, you're not just talking about what you remember, you're talking and reliving. And so the details are far more precise and far more detailed than what another type of memory might be.
sure.
You know, I've told people I haven't been back to that hospital in years and years and years, because we left Alaska shortly after that and returned to upstate New York. And I tell people, if I went back to the hospital that I worked in and where this took place, I wouldn't even be able to find my way to the PT department that I worked in, because I just don't remember that many of the details about the hospital
Sure.
layout and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And yet, my near-death experience, and when I tell it, it's I'm there all over again for
Yeah.
those parts of it.
When you were going through that tunnel headed to the light, uh, and you had realized that or maybe it was after the light, where you realized you didn't have feet. You were looking down
Yeah,
and you didn't see your feet. But then you see your guide and you recognize the sandals and the strappies going up to his calves. Did you notice that you had feet by then?
no, I still I didn't even bother looking at myself only that one time.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, but that was the feeling I had, was that the essence of me was still there,
Mhm.
but it although it felt like it was a body, it, I don't believe that I actually was, but I don't know how to explain that either,
Yeah. Yeah.
other than that my soul, my spirit was within this encapsulated something
Sure.
that was there.
Uh, okay. Do you believe that this man was your spirit guide?
Yes, I do.
Mhm.
And that's because, again, some more miraculous stories.
Please, that's what we're here for.
um, Years after I learned about meditation,
Mhm.
and so I began to meditate regularly. And what I would do is I'd have a journal, because I'm a journaler type of person. I was even before this took place. But once I learned meditation, I learned that when I meditated, if something came through to me, I would record it, record the date, and record what it was that came through to me. And frequently, once I began to meditate, I would see this guide exactly as he had looked during my near death experience. And impressions and messages would come through to me about things. I would record them and so on. So yeah, and then other spiritual guides also I would begin to see and identify in certain ways, but he seemed to be the main person who was, I guess, my main spiritual guide.
Yeah. Yeah. I call my main guide, his name is MJ, and I call him my manager. uh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, the name part, this is another miraculous thing. Okay.
Yes, please.
For a long, long time, he never really communicated anything in terms of a name or something. And a week before I was going to a consciousness um, sort of a gathering conference type of thing in Raleigh. I live
Mhm.
in North Carolina now. I was meditating, and in this meditation, unlike a lot of the other ones, he communicated to me and he said, "We lived together thousands of years ago in South America. My name is Carlos." And so I recorded all this after my meditation and everything. And as I'm writing it all out, I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, there weren't any Carloses in South America thousands of years ago. The Spaniards came and I knew, this is detail oriented me, okay?
Yes.
And so, but I wrote it all and I didn't think much about it and went to this conference. And you know how they have sessions and then in between there'll be snack bars and break for water and that.
Yeah.
So there was an in between thing, and a woman was speaking, and there were several people standing around listening to her, by the snack table. And for some reason, I was drawn to what's she talking about? What's going on? And I got over in time to hear her saying she had just come back from South America, which perked up my attention. And she said she had been teaching healing touch to people who were native to South America and going to see sacred sites while she was there.
Awesome.
And so, and she said, and it's so exciting, she says, there's this young man from South America who's native to South America. And she said, he's so naturally adept at healing touch and such a fascinating person. And, she says, he even, took me to one of the sacred sites when my ride fell through. And she said, it's the oldest one in Peru. She said, this site is called Caral Supe. And that's Caral and then Supe. And so anyway, she says, it's so neat. And, she says, I've asked him to come to my holistic center. And so the whole time she's talking this, I'm just feeling electricity building up inside me, and then she says, so next week, Carlos is coming to my holistic center. And as soon as she said Carlos, I burst out in tears.
I'm
And I
sure.
said, oh my gosh, oh my God. And she says, what's the matter? What's going on? So I told her the story of my near-death experience. I told her about my meditations and my spirit guide. And, that my spirit guide had given me this message about South America and his name, Carlos. And she said, oh, let me show you a picture of him on my phone. So she pulls up this picture of him on the phone, and he looks exactly like my spirit guide, but in modern clothing.
Yeah.
And she said, and I'll show you the sacred site we went to, because she says, I had a vision when we went there about what it was like thousands of years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And so she pulled it up, and it was identical to the brown rocky ground area that I had come out into during my near-death experience. And I said, oh my God, that's what it looked like. That's what it was. And I said, and when we went up over the slope, it was all green and lush. And she says, that's just what it's like, because she said it's off from the ocean, and the part that the ocean winds go over is green, but this area where the old archaeological site is down, and it's brown and rocky. So, wow,
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
So I got to meet him.
Wow. Yes, you did.
And I got to learn from Journey of Souls by Michael Newton
Yes. Yes.
how we leave a portion of our essence on the other side all
Mhm.
the time,
All the time. Yep.
and yet can reincarnate, bringing a portion with us,
A little bit with. Yep.
and that your spiritual guide, on occasion, can incarnate in the same lifetime period as you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was mind boggling. And
It
when I met
is.
him and told and shared all of this with him, he said, I don't remember anything like that. I just know you're telling me the truth. I can't explain it, but
Yeah.
I know you're telling me the truth. And then he proceeded during this ritual thing that we did at the Holistic Center to get up and come and stand behind me exactly like my guide had stood behind me and had shaken his hands on the side and then came around in front of me when he communicated that we had lived together thousands of years ago in South America and that his name was Carlos. And Carlos got up and he had shakers like with seeds inside
Yep.
gourds type of thing.
Yep.
And he shook them on either side of me, just like my guide had done in the meditation. It was just unreal.
It's you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it is so real. And at the same time, it is so surreal that it's actually happening. Like how is this all coming together? These synchronicities that are just lining up one right after another. And that
Yeah,
is the evidence that spirit gives us that we oh yeah, it's
I
just
know.
yeah, yeah. And what I love so much about this is that we have access to this here, now,
Mm-hmm.
here in meditation.
Yeah.
We can go to those places, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all have access to this. And so what I loved, truly loved in your story as well, because I can relate so deeply with it, was when you came up to the records, the Hall of Records, the Akashic Records, where the books of life are. I mean, whatever we want to call it, it's
Yes.
all the same thing. But, I experienced that in my own really deep, really transformational meditation one night, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
ago. And for to hear you describe it in the way that I still see it in my mind's eye, it's identical, and how huge it was, and
Yeah.
and the feeling, and you know it's incredible. It's just incredible. I've had a number of spiritually transformative experiences
Mm-hmm.
where the guy just came out fully transformed. I didn't know that's what it was back then. And Jen talking about this last week, how she
Mm-hmm.
was talking about how the International Association of Near Death Studies and the near death.
Which I introduced her to.
Oh, okay. And the NDERF, the Near Death Experience Research Facility
Foundation.
Foundation, them too. I mean, all this studying and research and trying to understand all of this, they're recognizing that the spiritually transformative experiences are very, very similar to the actual
Yes.
near-death experiences where there is record that you literally died, right? Um, that they're so similar. And I just find that fascinating and also very exciting, that and
Yeah.
it just shows that we first and foremost at the very foundation are this truly immaculate spiritual being living in this body,
Mm-hmm.
every single one of us. And none of
Yep.
us are any better than the other. None of us are higher or lower or less than or more than or any of that. And that we're all here to experience this life as we're living it in all these different cultures, in all these different subcultures, and all these different continents and planets. Yes, there are other planets
Mm-hmm.
where we're living, all walking each other home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And
Very
it's
much.
stories like this that you're sharing with us and that so many others are sharing. And it's the word is getting out there and it's getting out there. Thank you. It's just amazing. Amazing. But I do
It
have a
is.
question here. I do have a question.
Oh,
So going into this, you were Christian. Um, what was life like after this for you?
very challenging
I bet.
in
I
many
bet.
ways
I bet.
because I called it trying to fit the square peg into the round hole.
Mhm.
Okay. In terms of the most real thing ever to me was my near death experience. And yet, what I learned from it, what I experienced during it, was so different than what I was believing. Like, for example, I was really worried if I went to heaven that if I hadn't experienced this baptism of the Holy Spirit, then I wouldn't be able to.
Mhm.
And more importantly, neither would my father who had died and my brother who'd been killed in the car accident, because I knew they didn't go through this born again thing and this baptism in the Holy
Exactly.
Spirit.
Yep,
So it
exactly.
was such a mix of feelings. I was thinking, you know, I want to be able to, but if they're not there, but if it was just mass confusion. And as I returned back into church, all I could hear was judgmentalism and exclusion
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
not measuring up and having to be very careful and having to repeatedly repent and having to, all of the messages that I was getting were so incongruent with what I had experienced that I became more and more uncomfortable to the point where I finally said, no, I can't do this. I need to learn more about what actually happened to me and what this experience means and how it relates to everybody. And I'm not getting answers other than things that just really grate against me,
Yeah.
you know, in church. So that led me to completely leave. My husband, though, was still very involved with church. And so eventually, you know, uh, now we were able to find a church that incorporated much more open-mindedness and yet filled some of his needs,
Sure.
and so we were able to do that. And I was also able to take a 4-year theological course all about Christianity, about the ministry of Jesus, about the early church, about all of the things that led to the final version of the Bible, and how many things were mistranslated, were left out,
Yeah.
were twisted, um, and it made everything make a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, and yet it made me know even more that my experience was far, far and away the truth
Yeah.
and the reality. I even contacted the doctor who had saved me 30 years plus later, and he was still practicing. And I emailed him and said, you probably won't remember me. But I wanted you to know, I wanted to thank him. And I also wanted to ask him if he remembered when I shared about my near death experience. And oh, yeah, he did. And he had used what he did to save my life, taught it to other surgeons who then were able to use it to save other people's lives. And he did remember that I had shared my near death experience. And he said, you might be interested to know that you're not the only patient who's ever shared that they had a near death experience. I've had others, but none as quite like yours, is the way he worded it.
Yeah.
So,
The ripples. Just like you said, the
yeah,
ripples.
yeah, it's amazing. And the only reason I recontacted him was because in this 4-year course that I was telling you about, there was a retired vascular surgeon in the class that went on for the 4 years. And we shared personal experiences over the course of that 4 years. And when I shared about mine and my near-death experience, he said, you need to find him. He said, I'm telling you, he will remember you.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
knew from his own experiences and stuff. But if he hadn't urged me to do that, I probably wouldn't have, reached out to him and found out and all of that. So many things. Jen and I, for example, I had decided I wanted to get past life regression and between lives regression done. So I looked in this North Carolina area, and Jen's name came up in with, being Newton trained, Michael Newton trained. And so because of Michael Newton, who was introduced to me by the lady who had made the trip to South America and brought Carlos up.
Yeah.
She was the one who told me about Michael Newton. And so when I looked and I saw these different hypnotherapists I might go to, and she had come from upstate New York. Wasn't that interesting? So I contacted her and I went to her for the between lives regression, and we hit it off so well. And I said, I feel as though I already know you, that I know you. And she says, yeah, I kind of feel that way about you too, And where did you live? And the town that I lived in before coming to North Carolina was the town that she grew up in.
Oh my God. Of course it was.
Yeah, of course it was. Small town. And then she said, well, what did you do there? And I said, I was a physical therapist. And, at such and such a time, when were you the physical therapist? And so anyway, we figured out that we're pretty sure that I was a PT for her when she had a hand surgery done and then had physical therapy afterward. And I had been taking a writing course at that time, and I had written a story about this patient who had gone to college and was going for music as her major, and then, had the issues. I mean, this is the type of interweaving stuff. Seriously. That is just unbelievable. And then Jen shared about her experience, spiritually transformative experience. And I said, you need to come to IONS. We have IONS meetings here. And so, I brought her and convinced her. She came to an IONS meeting, and then everything is growing out there from her. So, and this last national convention conference was in Arlington, Virginia. And my husband didn't want to go. Usually he goes and then does his own thing while I do IONS. And he didn't want to go. And she said, so Jen got in touch with me. We're friends on Facebook and stuff. And she said, well, I'm going to go. Would you like to room with me? So she and I roomed together at the IONS conference in Arlington this year. So that's how close Jen and I are.
Yeah, that is, I often say in this show and the podcast, and I mean, and in my readings, synchronicity permeates everything all the time. It's how spirit gets our attention. It's our spirit guides nudging us this direction and this direction and this direction. And that whole story was riddled with synchronicity upon synchronicity upon synchronicity. And the fact that you realized that you had actually met each other and worked with each other in a professional medical capacity the way that you did in the past, I mean, and here you are back together in this form of expansion and consciousness and spiritual awareness. I mean, just wow.
I'll add another one for you.
Please.
After I returned, after my near-death experience, there were a number of things that as time went on, I would have like a deja vu feeling if something that they had shown me about my future that I wasn't allowed to remember actually took place. then I would get, as it was taking place, not before, but as it was taking place, I would get this deja vu feeling of, oh
Okay.
yeah, this is one of them. This is one of those things that it was important for me to be back here for. And I have a niece who's only a year younger than me, one of those bizarre, change of life babies is what I was. And so her mother, my sister, was 22 years older than me. But anyway, she went through the very tragic experience of losing her 20-year-old daughter um, to liver failure and unable to get a transplant in time, and a very sad situation. And so I was with her a lot after what took place, and introduced her to compassionate friends type of experience, other parents who have lost a child. And this one day I was at work and I suddenly saw, and I don't know if I was looking at the newspaper, what I was doing, but I saw that there was going to be a medium who was coming like that night. He was going to be doing in a small auditorium, he was going to be doing readings and doing, that environment. And so I just got this strong feeling that I needed to bring my niece to this. And it was only a matter of months after her daughter had passed. And I got a hold of her at home, and it wasn't cheap for the tickets for us to get in, but I just felt it so strongly. I need to bring you here. And so we did. We went to it. And she ended up going up, being called up on stage and being read, and a number of really dramatic messages coming through to her, including him calling out from on stage her daughter's first name, which was Heather, which is not an everyday common.
Yep.
And describing a bunch of things that he knew that it was us or her that was supposed to come up.
Yep.
And so all of that happened. And I have wonderful experiences with mediums, and I very much believe in mediumistic messages.
It's very real. It's very real. Yeah, you were guided to take her for sure.
Yeah.
Thomas John.
Thomas John?
Thomas John, is that it?
The medium's name, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Oh, rats. Okay. It's all right.
I know. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
But, and he used to be Catholic. He oh gosh. He had a severe illness and nearly died as a young child, and had his mediumistic abilities that came about after that. And like I said, I know he has written a couple of books, but he's early. He's one of the early, he was even earlier than John Edward and any of the others. He goes back a long ways. I'm sorry.
That's
if
okay.
I think
No,
of it
that's
or
totally
I find
okay.
it, yeah, I can email it to you later or whatever.
That's okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that story though. It's just this is why we do what we're doing right now, sharing this information. Because the world is really becoming more aware of the spirituality within them, the spiritual experiences that are so easily written off, logically overridden, as imagination or dreams or fantasy, whatever, but there's that's the real world. That's where the real life is. This is just temporary, and this is the dream, they say, And I I was wondering, while you were telling your story, while you were watching your review and while you were interacting with your guide and seeing the other beings, the other guides, the other people, seeing your loved ones across the water,
Hmm.
like what was your like? I know you felt the love, the unconditional love, and that overwhelming sense of, but like what else was there? Like, can you expound on that a little bit more? It's just like it's kind of
Yeah, I
yeah.
well, I thought for a long time, why did I feel with the group of spiritual beings that were there for my life review? Why did I feel like they cared deeply about me? I should know who they are, all of that. Um, and it was long afterward as I'm reading and I'm learning stuff and came to Michael Newton that I thought they helped me plan my life and they're my soul group.
Ah, yes.
And that's why they were there in that point in time, in that framework. And so that all made sense to me then, but I didn't at the time I was going through my near death experience. I had those feelings, but as I looked at them, I wasn't registering, oh, this is, this is my soul group member of this type and this one.
Yes.
I just, but I did get the feeling that they had helped me plan my life. That feeling did come across to me. So that also impressed upon me that I lived before I lived this life. And that then drew me into reincarnation and
Yes.
all of all of the things that I have learned in that direction. So it just, and these are pieces that didn't happen the day after my near death experience. And it was a process
Oh yeah.
over many years and
Mhm.
over many experiences and encounters. Really important encounters that led me to ions, that led me to all these different steps, but it at different points in my life.
Yes. And throughout your life,
Yeah.
the synchronicities just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming to fill in those little
Mm-hmm.
blanks. And oh yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. It
So
is.
what's life like for you now? Here we are. Did you say it was 20 or 30 years ago?
It was 40 years ago. It
Oh
was
my
in
goodness.
1982.
Okay, so we're
So
decades
42
later.
years ago,
Mhm.
or will be 42 this summer. Yeah.
What's
So
life
long
like
time.
today?
Today, my life has been a lot more about sharing like I'm doing with you right now.
Mhm.
Now I've thought about writing a book. I've thought about different things, but nothing seemed to fit as comfortably as just kind of communicating one on one like we're doing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then because of interviews now being put out there like YouTube or whatever,
Mhm.
um, I usually will say, well, hey, if you've seen an interview and it brought a question to you or something that you'd like to check in with me on and say, what about this? I give my email address and I tell people it's really important that you say, in the subject line of an email, saw your near death experience interview with Jeffrey Peck,
Mhm.
or, whatever happened to be an interview that they may have seen.
Yes.
And it's what has come from that has continued to expand, my consciousness and my ability to help, reach out and help people and share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's your own way of being in service to people. And I
Yeah.
love this. I love this. So for those of you who do have questions, who may have had an experience that really stuck with you and made you feel like you were going a little bit crazy and you haven't really had anybody to ask, feel free to reach out to Karen.
Yeah.
Karen, what is the email address?
It is BLANCE at live.com.
Okay. I'll have that in the show notes. I'll have that in the YouTube notes. I'll have it in, oh, it'll be everywhere. And in the subject line, be sure and put in there. Can you say that again, Karen, for everybody in the subject line so she knows where you're coming from?
Mm-hmm. Saw your NDE interview with Jeffrey Peck.
Thank you. All right. Oh, I love this. I love this so much. I often say on this show, I repeat myself all the time, but we each hold a different part of the manual
Yes.
based on our own trials, tribulations, challenges, things that we've overcome. It could be addiction. It could be a massive car accident. It could be health issues. It could be, well, like for you, your NDE and where you came through that.
Yeah.
But we each hold a different piece of this manual, and it's in that where we give back and we say, "Hey, let me help you. I got the instruction booklet. I can help you."
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just
And I
fabulous.
always do try to say, this is what I experienced, and this is what I think.
Mhm.
This is what I feel and I think because of what I experienced. You have your own life
It's
and you
true.
have your own path. And please don't think I'm saying do this, don't do that,
Mhm.
anything like that, because that's another thing that I've come to feel very strongly about is that everybody can share their manual and their piece of the manual,
Yeah,
but the whole manual for an individual person is going to be coming from within them and
absolutely.
within what the synchronicities lead them to.
Yes. It's
Yeah,
it's it's different for all of us. It's different for all of
it
it. But
is.
in that difference, it's so similar. In
Yeah.
those differences is where it's so similar. And that's when we truly open up and realize, oh my gosh, we are so the same and we are
Mhm.
so connected and we're all so in this together, and this opposition and detachment and being opposed from whether it's across red and blue lines or country lines, or religious
Mhm.
lines, and
Yeah.
we're all here for the same reasons, and so connected. I'm so grateful, Karen, that Jen said you got to talk to my friend Karen.
She's a sweetheart.
Oh, she is. Jen, I know you'll probably hear this, and it's a great big thank you to you. And I'm sending you a big hug from here. Karen
Oh,
is too. Um, do you have any last words of wisdom for those who are watching and listening? Just something that you've really like that may have just hit you recently that just really brought you to another point of that awareness, that aha.
I think the only thing I would say is um, to really truly respect your own self worth and your own internal intuition, because it should be kind of your final barometer about what resonates true to you. And that's what you really need to go in that direction, and then and go grow from there with whatever comes to you, because that's one of the many things that I found is that so much has come to me, not me. I've done some of my own research and learning, but when I do and when I follow my own path, suddenly things open that never opened before. And so don't work at it really hard. Trust your inner being and your own personal intuition, but then pick and choose what resonates and that feels absolutely true to you.
Yes. Buddha said, take what resonates and leave the rest.
Yes. Well, that was a lot quicker than the way I spit it out, wasn't it?
But it's so true. Your advice, your words it's beautiful. We have a team of spirit, an entourage of spirit on the other side that are cheering us on, that our guides are nudging us, our loved ones are nudging us. And we feel those nudges like Karen was talking about, that internal feeling, that intuition. We can sense it, we can feel it, and to not turn a blind eye to that, to really pay attention to that. And thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's how spirit gets our attention. And
Absolutely.
it's so easily overridden. Logical override is a very real thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
We can
Karen.
unconvince us ourselves of some of the most convincing things in the
Oh my
world
gosh. Isn't that
sometimes.
the truth? That is so true. We ask spirit, for all of this evidence, all of these signs. I need a sign. I need a sign. I need another sign. You get these signs. You get billboards on fire, and we ask for more signs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, to be human.
Yeah. Yep.
But this is the best part. We can laugh at it. We can laugh at it. And it's that, in that laughter and that lightness, that's where spirit is. So you
Absolutely.
guys, Karen, thank you so much for being here. I'm hugging you through the screen so hard.
Oh,
I,
hugs,
I'm
hugs.
just so grateful that you're here, and for you to be here and share this amazing story, and just all of the wisdom that you've learned from it over the years. And thank you for sharing your little part of the manual.
Oh, I'm glad I can do it.
All right, you guys, thank you so much. You've been watching another episode of Something Super Spiritual. My fabulous guest, Karen Thomas. We'll be talking again very soon. Thank you again for listening to the Something Super Spiritual podcast. If you know someone who would enjoy this episode, please do share it with a friend. For show notes, links, and to purchase a mediumship reading, my website is somethingsuperspiritual.com. You can also easily subscribe and follow the show on your favorite app, sign up for my newsletter for bonus content, and to keep the conversation going, you can easily join the Facebook community. It's all right there at the website, somethingsuperspiritual.com. Signing off for now, namaste.